Welcome to a spin-off to the Huxley Morton Podcast with me, Lucy Gilmour. Today I'm joined by Tiffany Ashton from Clinicentials, who is going to share her tips on how to get into the clinical research industry and how you can progress your career once you're in. So Tiffany, thanks for coming on the show. Tell me a bit more about how you got into clinical research and how you got started.
Yes. All right. So I got my start actually in clinical research by chance. I didn't even know it existed. When I was graduating from high school, I was going to be moving to a different city, and I was looking at potential job opportunities in the new city I was going to. And so what I I applied for an admin assistant job, and it turns out it was at a site management organization, so a SMO, where they conduct clinical research trials, and usually it's a center location, and then they work with various doctors in the industry, or actually in the community, for clinical research trials. So I aligned myself as an admin assistant with that company, and after a few months, I was really intrigued by the study coordinators, because we had study coordinators that were at our home base, and then they would go to the various doctors' offices to conduct the clinical research trials for, the big pharmaceutical companies. And so I asked the director to tell me a little bit more about clinical research and, just give me some more exposure. And so they agreed, and they let me start shadowing the clinical research coordinators, sitting in on site initiation visits, and just really absorbing clinical research as a whole. And I would say about 3 to 6 months of shadowing, then they were able, and I was also I was pursuing my undergrad as well at that time. And then I did take a couple basic courses on good clinical practice, medical terminology. So I had that as like a foundation. And then from there, I started shadowing, and I was able to slowly transition into a study coordinator role. And so that's how I got my first start, as a clinical research coordinator. And I've been in the industry now 18 years. So from when I started back as a clinical research coordinator, then I went on to be a CRA, and then a clinical trial manager, and then also a project manager. So it's been a long road, but a lot of experience, a lot of roles that I've covered in that time. And it's so exciting. I still enjoy the industry even to this day.
It's funny that you should say that, you didn't know it existed, because so many people we speak to kind of just fell into it. And was your degree sort of healthcare focused as well?
Yeah, so my undergrad was in anthropology. Mm-hmm. And then I went back and got my master's in clinical research. Right. And then I have a certificate also in clinical research, trial design and management. So my base was like life sciences, and then also my master's. But one thing that I can say, this industry is more experience-based. So if you have a degree that's in a different area, but you can gain that experience, that goes a long way. Because if you look at a lot of the job descriptions, it says, life sciences degree or equivalent experience, so I do want to mention that to, those that are interested in the industry, that definitely look at those job descriptions, because the experience, if you get that experience, that goes a long way. So if you're coming from nursing, or, you've been a medical doctor maybe in a different country, or any of those things, that experience can go a long way as well.
Yeah, I think definitely. And I guess that's kind of the theme of what we're going to run through today is how people who maybe don't have experience or are new to the clinical research industry can kind of get their foot in the door, so to speak. And so the different roles within the clinical research field. So
Exactly.
you're now working with Clinessentials. Tell us a bit more about Clinessentials and what it is you guys do over there.
To help clinical research professionals maximize their day, make them more organized, and just really help the flow of their work, because there's a lot of work in the industry. There's always a lot of work coming down the pipeline. And for our CRAs and our CRCs specifically, they are constantly bombarded with multiple studies, and our tools help them just really streamline their communication and also just make them more efficient in their workday. So we have our CRA audit notes line that replaces the yellow sticky notes that are traditionally used in the industry, and that's been shown to save anywhere from 25 to 40% on the time for writing for the CRAs, and then also for the CRCs, just actioning those items. It goes much, much faster than the traditional yellow sticky notes. So we have that tool for the CRAs and CRCs, and then we just recently we have a tool for our project managers and clinical trial managers. It's a tool that they can help organize their week and look at their priorities for the week, what vendors they need to follow up with, milestones that are upcoming that they need to keep track of. So just various little tools that help, checklists, action item pads, just little simple upgrades that really go a long way in the workday, especially when you're working alone or you're working with a team and there's only 24 hours in a day. You just got to maximize your time.
It's funny you should say that that historically people use sticky notes, or still do, I guess, because I've always been a fan of sticky notes, and my desk is littered with them everywhere. And James always berates me for that and says, I can't believe this is so disorganized. I used to work as a project manager, and to be honest, that is how I used to work. You used to have your file pack. I mean, I wasn't in clinical research, but you had your file pack of your project that you were running, and you'd have little sticky notes in all of the different areas.
Exactly.
To kind of as little prompts of where you're up to on each bit. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So the CRA audit notes, they're pre-printed with industry catchphrases. So like protocol deviation, serious adverse event, and they're color coded. So when a study coordinator sees that, they know what to action because it's a protocol deviation. It's a serious adverse event. It's pre-printed and it's color coded. So when they see that particular color, it stands out, versus a yellow sticky note. You could have to go through 5 or 10 or 15 of them. And then you're like, oh, a protocol deviation's in here. I didn't even realize, just because there's no real indication. So that's just a simple upgrade, a simple switch goes a long way on the receiving end and also on the writing end. You just don't have to write as much, when the CRAs are going through 10, 20, 30 charts at some sites.
Great. So you've got a series of organizational tools, I guess, there. And was there a course as well that you've put together? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So since we had originally spoke at Lucy, we have launched our clinical trial manager course. And this course is twofold. It can be, and there's a lot of promotions within organizations. So maybe you're a senior CRA and then they give you an opportunity to be a clinical trial manager and you jump at that opportunity, but you're not sure of the big picture, from study kickoff all the way out to study closeout. You're not sure, you may have a few pieces, but this course helps those that are jumping into the role and needing to actually perform and understand what they're doing. And then there's the other aspect of it is for those that know they want to be a clinical trial manager and they want to get some formal training. This is a program that they can also take. So both sides of the coin, but it's something that's not currently out and available. And so I know there are CRC courses and CRA courses, but when it comes to CTM courses, that is very important. And the reason why it's so important is the CTM is the captain of the whole study. So if they aren't sure of what to do, or even one decision that they make could have a downstream effect, 5 months from now, or at the end of the study, or how the data is analyzed. So that's what that course, that the Clinicentials Clinical Trial Manager course is helping for those CTMs that want a little bit more guidance, or haven't seen the full life cycle of being a CTM. And so that's what will help with.
That's fantastic. And is that on online, presumably, course? Is that a guided one, or something that people do in their sort of own free time? Or
so it's twofold. There are some guided courses, and then there's some self-study courses as well. So it's 2 in 1, but it takes I would say about 20 hours, but we spread it over about 3 weeks. And we can do it faster, or we can do it slower. It just really depends. But we've had 2 classes already. And so, we kind of tailored it to that particular class's preference.
Oh, fantastic. Sounds really good. And
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, from the course, obviously you guys have put this together, I guess, based on feedback and your organisational tools that you've had. So what would you say are the most common questions that you're receiving from people making inquiries, or when thinking about putting the course and the organisational tools together?
So there's a couple of things. So we get a lot of questions on how do you get into research, just in general, or how do you do career progression? And then, so it just really depends. So those that want to get into research, we have some tips on some basic courses that they can take, and some items that you can are community resources that you can utilize. So that's one way. But if you're in a role and you want to move to the next role, that's where, courses like the Clinical Trial Manager course is helpful, because you either have been presented with the opportunity, or that you want to get off the road as a CRA and you want to be a CTM. And so that's your next career progression. So you're starting to already think, what can I do to set myself apart? So it just really depends. But we get a lot of questions in different areas, but the most frequent are, how do you get into research? And then how can I move up, to the next?
I would definitely say that how do you get into clinical research has definitely been something that has hit my inbox. It seems to be more and more frequently over the coming weeks. And as you know, I've sent them your way, because as a recruiter, I guess our clients are coming to us for people with more experience. So we're probably working with people that are 5-6 plus years into their sort of career. But for those, I know that we do have listeners that are just starting out. So how, I guess, do you have any tips, maybe like 3 tips for our listeners who want to get into clinical research?
Yeah, so first you want to understand clinical research. That's what you want to know, and kind of understand, why is there clinical research? What is it about, and what are the stages? So one of the things I would suggest is take some core classes, and there are some free classes available. One, it's a good clinical practice course. It's called GCPfinding.com, and they offer a free GCP course, and you can do a quiz where you can get a certificate. And so if you're starting off brand new, you want to have a nice little certification that you at least understand good clinical practice. So that's one course that I would recommend. Another one would be drug development process, and maybe medical terminology if you're not coming from a medical background. Drug development process, you may be able to find a lot of YouTube videos on just what is the drug development process, phase 1 through 4. You want to understand what is phase 1 through 4, why do we do clinical research, and then medical terminology. You can usually take those online, maybe at a local community college or some other course. You can just get that online. So those core classes are number 1. I would also suggest that you find out what career path what interests you the most? Do you want to be a clinical research coordinator? Do you want to be a CRA, which is traveling, on the road a lot? Do you want to be a CTM? Because based off of that, you want to make sure you align yourself on the right career progression.
Mhm.
So for instance, if you want to be a project manager, you want to go towards the project manager role from the start. You don't want to start way over here and you're like, oh no, I got to come back to be over here. Like you want to see where you want to understand where you want to be at the end, and then work backwards and say, okay, now what's the progression? If I want to ultimately be here, where do I need to start? So that would be another tip. And then the last tip I would say is find out now, if you want to be a clinical research coordinator, go to online and find local clinical research centers near you. And maybe, just depending on your background and your comfortability, you may want to speak to that site director and tell them that you are interested in being a clinical research coordinator, and see if there's any volunteer opportunities that you can do. That's a good way to get your foot in the door and show that you're a good worker. And chances are, when there's an opening, they'll say, oh, wow, Lucy's over here, she's been great volunteering for the last 3 months, yeah, let's offer her this position because she understands. Let's see, maybe, something like that. So that's a good entryway, a good, look at the local clinical research centers there, or wherever you're at, and see. You don't have to do a lot of time, maybe 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, whatever you're able to do. You can organize lab kits. You can organize study supplies, like sometimes they give blood pressure cuffs and diabetes glucometers. You can organize, you can help wherever you can, but just show that you're interested and get in there and absorb as much as you can about research. And that's been successful for a lot of people, that method. So if you're interested, those are the 3 tips that I would say about clinical research.
I think they're great tips, and because sometimes people can think that that's their dream career, and then they, finally after 6 months of searching, get the job. And then they start and they realize, actually, this isn't for me. So I guess the volunteering aspect, kind of doing it and you're volunteering, you're not necessarily getting paid. It's a real test to work out whether you actually like it or not.
Exactly. And it just depends. Some research centers are bigger than others, and they may be able to give a small stipend, but most may not be able to. So just know that that is something that you have to be willing to do. But it doesn't have to be 40 hours a week. It can just be 5, 10. Some clinics do Saturday clinics for recruitment, and that could be you can come in and help every Saturday. I remember we did Saturday clinics, and we had 30 patients in on a Saturday, because that's when they weren't at work, and it was hectic. We had to have everything lined up, everything timed. We did the consents individually. It was very hectic, but even having a set of hands, a volunteer hand, would be excellent in those opportunities. So there's a lot of opportunities out there.
Great tips there, Tiffany. Thanks for those. And I guess in terms of career progression, what are the typical career paths? I guess talk us through, like, if you wanted, as you said previously, if you want to become a project manager, you need to start here to go there. What are those typical sort of career paths?
Okay, so typically the clinical research coordinator role is the foundation. And it's the foundation if you want to be a clinical research associate, which is the auditor, the monitor that actually travels to multiple sites. They may have 10 or 15 doctors that they manage, and 2 to 3 protocols that they manage. And so they would have to travel every 4 to 6 weeks. They're a road warrior, as you say. They're on the road traveling 2 to 3 days per week. So if you want to be a CRA, the CRC role is a good progression. So you want to start at the CRC and then work your way to be a CRA. And I would say, when you have your monitoring visits, express your need or express your desire. If you're a study coordinator, express your desire to be a CRA with the CRAs that you interact with, because a lot of times they get notification of openings, or we need additional members on the team, and they will reach out. The companies will reach out to the CRAs on their team and say, do you know of anyone that would make a good CRA, or who would want to be a CRA? So if you're a study coordinator and you've already said, hey, keep me in mind in case you have any openings, that's a good pathway there. Now, if you're in the CRA position, you can be either a lead CRA from there, which is like the lead CRA on the team. So it's one person that's probably the most experienced with the study, and they oversee the other CRAs. And if there's a question from the CRAs in the field, they'll send it to the lead CRA. Sometimes that lead CRA has to monitor too, but other times they just are in the office and they're a lead CRA and they do all of the CRA management. They review trip reports. They're also in meetings with sponsors and learning about the study deliverables and disseminating it to the CRA team. So that's another, if you want to go from CRA, you can go to lead CRA, or you can go from CRA to CTM, which is clinical trial manager. And the clinical trial manager is responsible for the clinical deliverables. The study is on the clinical trial manager's shoulders for delivering on time, recruitment on time, staying within budget, making sure we have the appropriate resources, making sure we have the appropriate sites. So the study as a whole rests with the clinical trial manager. So if you're okay with that level of pressure, if you would say, because there's a lot of eyes on you because you are the one that has to deliver the study, then that could be a really good career progression from CRA. You can go to CTM. And then now I will say, from each company differs. Sometimes a clinical trial manager and a clinical project manager, those names are used interchangeably. So sometimes you have to ask, if you see an opening for a clinical project manager, if you ask, are you in charge of the clinical deliverables on the study? And if they say yes, then you are technically a clinical trial manager, and you're going to be doing the day-to-day activities to ensure the study stays on track. But other companies, they mention clinical project managers, and they are not involved in the day-to-day activities for clinical deliverables. They're more client-facing as a clinical project manager. And so that means if there's a sponsor like a Merck or a Pfizer, that clinical project manager is working hand in hand in lots of meetings with the sponsor, looking at maybe a portfolio of drugs, a portfolio of studies. They're not focused on one study like a clinical trial manager would be. So there's a slight distinction, but the natural progression from a CTM is to be a CPM, which would be like on the portfolio level and more working with the sponsor hand in hand on how we're going to roll out this study or this study drug across many studies, across, it's like a bigger platform than just one particular study. So those are kind of the career progressions and just the differences between the various roles. So that's why I say you want to see where you want to be. Yeah. So you can work up there. And there's another role that I didn't mention. It's called clinical trial associate or assistant. It's a CTA. And those CTAs work very closely with the CTMs, the clinical trial managers. They're like the right hand. So like for meeting minutes and meeting agendas and, follow up with the vendors, there's a CTA that works very closely with the CTM. That could be another career progression from a CTA position to a CTM. So you didn't have to come up through the CRA channel. You can go through from a CTA to a CTM and then a project manager. So there's different ways. You just have to really understand which would you enjoy, so you can make sure you don't spend time, because it does take time. You can't fast track yourself from CRA to CTM in 2 years. Like, that's not gonna, it's highly unlikely. Maybe at a small company, you may be able to come right in as a clinical trial manager if you have other relatable experience, but it's a nice progression. You're going to need some time, some skin in the game. So you have to make sure you're going the right way before you spend the time going through the channels.
Definitely. Some great tips there.
Yeah.
And I guess, I don't know about you, but we found definitely there seems to be a skills gap in the industry at the moment. And yeah, there's a whole heap of requirements, especially kind of at that sort of CPM, CTA level, but there's just not enough candidates at the moment. As a recruiter, that's definitely what we're finding. How are you, what are you finding on your side?
I have always seen this throughout the industry. Through my 18 years, I've always seen a gap. There's a gap there's a lot of openings, but not enough people. And there has always been that gap, but I feel here recently in the last 2 years, that gap is widened. There's just so many more openings than there are people. And there's a lot of people. There's a lot of great people. There's a lot of people that are coming from other areas like nurses and, other roles that would be great clinical research professionals. But we do know that the sponsors or the CROs have their criteria for, they have to have 2 to 3 years or 5 to 6 years, and there's not enough people to meet those criteria, that criteria. So, what I have seen, and it does give me a little hope, is that some of these sponsors and CROs are realizing that there is not enough of the qualified, in their eyes, 5, 10, 15 years experience. There's great candidates at the 2, the 3, the 4-year mark that have the drive, that want to be given the opportunity. And so a lot of sponsors and CROs are now giving them the opportunity with a training program or something of, some kind of guidance or mentorship within. So that they are trying to narrow the gap, but we need more of it, and we need more companies to be willing to do that. And we need more companies, just like Clinessentials has the clinical trial manager program. For that program, we take senior CRAs, senior CTMs, or even those that are entry-level CTMs into that course. So they have a foundation of clinical research, and then we build upon that foundation by teaching them the A through Z of clinical trial managers. So if there's companies that are more willing to take a candidate that has the experience in the industry and has recently completed a certificate program, that's going to help fill their gap more than saying, well, we can't find them, so now this requisition is just open for months on end because we can't find the person that has the experience that we're looking for. But we do have some options. You just have to be willing to work with those options that you have, because everyone at one point in time learned on the job. Hands down. Yeah. I've learned on the job, given a task. Yeah, given a task, and they're like, plan an investigators meeting. And I'm like, okay, let me work backwards. I have an idea, I've been at investigators meetings. Okay, but everyone has had to use it's the skill set you're looking for. Critical thinkers, go-getters, good under pressure, able to prioritize, reprioritize. That's the skill set that you need. And as long as they have the base and they have those skills, you can teach that person anything, and that person can step into any role with those skills. And that's what the sponsors and CROs should focus on. Do they have the skills that would make them successful?
I definitely think that, we need to be more focused on people having the basics that we can then mold and bring up, and definitely being a bit more open
Mm-hmm.
to those other options that, you know, we might have a year less experience than we'd ideally like, but
Yeah.
you know, do you think with the right guidance, and do you think
Yeah.
with their sort of go-getter attitude that they will come up to speed quite quickly?
Exactly.
I'd say that they probably can. So
Yeah.
yeah, well,
Exactly.
hopefully the industry does become a bit more susceptible to these sort of candidates, and we
Mm-hmm.
sort of start bridging that gap a little bit.
Yeah.
So some great tips there, Tiffany. Thanks for those.
No problem.
So we'll move on to our quick fire questions, which is usually what we do on our standard podcast, but I thought I'd adopt this into here.
Okay.
So what advice would you give to your younger self?
I would say travel more. I always wanted to backpack around the world, and I wish I would have done that more. I did travel later in life, but right after college, or right after even high school, maybe not high school, maybe right after college, you know, just doing a little bit more traveling, getting out there, exploring. I would have loved to do that. And I would just say, you know, I think that would be the biggest one that I would say to my younger self. Just get out there, learn about new cultures, see different places, try new foods, just get that exposure, because there's a world out there that you don't even know. You may only know your four walls, but there's so much else going out there in the world that you just want to take it all in.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And what is your what would you say is your best resource you would recommend to our audience? So is there any book or podcast? What sort of do you like to read to further your knowledge?
I would say get on the list for like the industry professional website. So like ACRP, the Association of Clinical Research Professionals, SOCRA, because they have a lot of articles that are in with the times, like new changes within the clinical research industry. You can also get on like biotech news or pharmaceutical news, so you can see the drugs that are coming down the pipeline. Anything like that would be good, just to stay in the know, because sometimes we're in our own little world and we are not even realizing, oh wow, I didn't even know, that drug is coming down the market. I worked on that drug, like any of those things. Are gene therapy is now the way to go. You just want to stay in the know so you can even keep your skills fresh. And maybe you'll say, okay, if you ever presented with the gene therapy opportunity to be a CTM on a gene therapy study, you may say, oh yeah, I'll take that, because I know that there's a lot of trials now in that area. So that's good experience to get.
It's definitely a field that we have seen a huge growth in terms of desire for candidates with that sort of experience. So I definitely recommend anyone to sort of look into that a bit more.
Yeah.
And what's your number one golden rule for life and business?
I would say progress over perfection, because a lot of times, we want everything to be so perfect that it tenses us up, and we stop dead in our tracks and we don't do anything, because it has to be so perfect. But just progress a little bit, and as you get better with time, you can make it more perfect. But it's better to get started than not get started at all.
Absolutely, definitely some sound advice there. And what do you get up to outside of work?
Well, I have my husband and my two kids keep me very busy. So we do a lot of family picnics or water fights in the backyard or movie nights. So that's, family life. That's what I do a lot. But when I do get some quiet time to myself, if I'm not, catching up on the industry news, which I try not to, I like to binge watch on medical shows. So the Grey's Anatomy, the Resident, New Amsterdam, the Good Doctor, those I say I should have went to medical school because I love those, those shows. I can watch the whole season. So I like to do that a lot, is do that binge watching, just on my free time.
Fantastic. It's clear that healthcare clearly runs through your veins. You can't get away from it. It's clearly something that you're passionate about.
Exactly. Yep. Even on the free time, I'm over there solving mysteries on what this particular patient was admitted for.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great to have you on the show. So just to round up, what's the best way of if people want to reach out to you or they want to know a bit more about the Clinessentials organizational tools or courses, what's the best way to get in contact?
Yeah, so we are on LinkedIn. So Clinessentials is on LinkedIn. We have a Clinessentials page, and then I also have a page linked to the Clinessentials page. So you can just search me, Tiffany Ashton, on LinkedIn. You'll see me. Usually, we're having great conversations on tips within the industry, how to get into the industry, how to do career progression, tips for any of the things, how to prioritize your day. So yeah, it's a good conversation. We have really good community. So I would suggest that my printer's going off at the exact time, but I would suggest that you connect there. And then, we're very open. Send me a message if you have any specific questions that I can answer real quick. And then we also have a career services hotline if you want to schedule some one-on-one time with a clinical research professional to further discuss, maybe you just want to brainstorm, or maybe you have a particular situation for your study that you've never been through, and we don't speak specifics, but we can help guide you. Okay, have you thought about this for planning that, etc. So we can kind of work through different scenarios if you don't have a mentor or someone that you can lean upon there at your company. So that's another service that we provide. So yeah, find us on LinkedIn. We're also on the YouTube for our videos at Clinessentials, on Instagram and Facebook, also at Clinessentials.
Perfect. Well, I'll put all the links in the bio so people can hit those up. And it's been fantastic, Tiffany. Thanks for your time today. And hopefully we'll speak again soon.